yeah, I ended up leaving the studio and having to come back in again. It's like, okay.
Yeah. Right, we're there now, mate. Or you should be. That's it. There you go, mate.
Yeah, yeah. Is Steve coming back in, or is he just watching?
Let me just take that off.
Okay.
So, welcome, Tom. We got there in the end, mate.
Yeah. Hi.
So, for anybody that doesn't know, this is Tom Moorcroft. He,
Hi, guys.
He is the owner of the Kray Fans Page.
Yeah.
So, Tom, give us a little bit of insight into yourself, mate, before we go too far.
Well, as everybody now knows, as everybody now knows, my name's Tom. I'm 40. I live down in the southwest.
Yeah, can you hear me, Tom?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah,
can you hear me?
Yeah, just give us a bit of insight into we start Page.
Like I say, for anybody, sorry about that. For anybody who doesn't know, my name's Tom. I'm 40. I started the Kray Twins Fan Page basically because I have a major interest in them, as well as a family connection. My ex-brother-in-law's stepdad was a taxi driver, black cab taxi driver back in the 60s, and he actually used to go regularly to 178 Valence Road, and if none of the firm was available to take Violet out anywhere, or if Ron and Reg were busy, Violet would actually give Steve a call, and he'd actually pick her up and take her to her destination. So there's the family connection I have, as you could say. But yeah, they've always been an interest to me.
What are we talking about year-wise?
You're talking roughly early 60s. It was before Ron and Reggie's.
So when was that? Was that like a late 50s, early 60s?
I'd say it was more the early 60s,
right.
That he got to know the Kray family.
Yeah.
He's before the conviction for that they got for murder anyway. So after that, he had moved up to the West Midlands. So around about late 60s, early 70s, Steve had actually moved over to the West Midlands. But he did have those connections with Ron, Reg, possibly Charlie. He never really mentioned Charlie much. It was always Ron, Reg, and Violet at Valence Road.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So when did you actually decide to do the fan page then? What was it, because of the connection?
It was because of the connection and my interest in the Krays, and we actually started as me and Andrew started the page. I mainly run it more than anything else. Just over 2 years ago now, and we have 22.3 thousand members. So yeah, you're looking around about.
That's not bad in 2 years, mate.
That's not bad. That's not bad. At one point, we was actually getting between 60 to 100 people wanting to join per day, because we also do have our link. Yeah, we have our link on other Kray pages.
And it just shows you what actually have and have.
Yeah, there's still a massive following for the Kray page, for the Kray family. That's something that will never really go
Yeah,
away.
as I say, it just shows you what
Hang on, you were breaking up there. Well, I don't know for sure whether it's me, but I'll go back into the front room. Ah, there we go. Yeah. Yeah, they're always going to have a massive following. No two ways about that. There's always going to be people who are interested in gangsters, and yeah, the Ron and Reg and the rest of the Kray family are always going to have that massive following. Because there's always going to be people who are interested in crime and crime stories.
Yeah. So I was actually brought up in the East End and drank in many pubs they did, all around Mile End, Bethnal Green, Limehouse. My grandfather actually lived in Eric Street, where they built the first billiard hall, where it all sort of started.
Yeah.
So my connection comes from there, and obviously meeting the older generation, that generation above me, who were actually about, in the 50s and 60s when they was their prime, so to speak, is where I sort of got to it, because I was, when they actually got convicted in '69, I was only 12, so I didn't really know the full, just started secondary school and whatever. So it wasn't really. All I remember people saying is that you could leave your front door open. Which obviously now you can't.
No.
Yeah. So. No. So let's just go over a couple of questions on the Krays, and then we'll sort of go through it from there. A couple of things I've been researching is evidently they both enjoyed poetry.
Yes, yeah. Ron, I think he actually did more poetry while he was in Broadmoor, and I believe it's possibly to help with his mental health as well. So he didn't just have the medication for his schizophrenia, but he also did poetry to help with his mental well-being. I believe the same with Reg as well. When Reg was in Parkhurst and Maidstone, he did poetry as well. Again, the same as Ron, really, to help with his mental state. And because a life sentence and a 30-year tariff is a hell of a long time. And it's quite, how can I put this? It was disgusting, really, that they did over the tariff, and they should have got nowhere near 30 years.
Yeah.
No. As people,
well, it was done to actually make an example, wasn't it? Same as the great train robbers.
Exactly. Yeah. And as Melford Stevens said himself, I am biased. And he was very biased towards the Kray twins. And I've also read up that their solicitor at the time didn't really help. He was more leaning towards the judges, to Melford Stevens.
Was he lent on, do you reckon?
I think he probably was. It's watching various documentaries and interviews with their solicitor at the time. He did try. He did actually try to get the tariff lowered, but because of their status and having to try and keep on the judge's right side, it didn't really help. Which actually is quite a shame. It didn't help them.
Yeah. But I think, but by the time the actual the court case come about and the conviction, I think most of the firm had sort of been got at by the police and whatever. And I think it was the beginning of the end. That sort of time. They'd already got away with a few, hadn't they? Even though they'd done a bit of time.
Definitely.
They got away with a few that they never done time for. And I think Nipper Reid, in my opinion, just wanted to get them off the streets.
He did. But as I've always said, excuse me, to people who have asked about their conviction, they were political prisoners in their own way.
Yeah.
Because Ron had links with Robert Boothby, who was a politician at the time. Some described him as like a rogue politician because of the interests that he had. Some of us have said he was, a nice bloke, but his take, as you can make of it what you want, what you can. So yeah,
do you think with Boothby that they set him up? They knew exactly what they was doing when, just going by the films where they was in his apartment house, and Ronnie took up the boy to look after him. Do you think it was planned?
I think it possibly was, because there was actually a part where Ronnie went to Boothby's apartment, and there was a young lad there who came across as quite charming, and Ron actually asked, "Who is this guy?" Ron obviously felt uncomfortable with this lad being there, even though it was Boothby's home. And Boothby openly turned around and said, "He's a burglar, and I send him to people's houses to burgle them."
Well, at least he was upfront about it.
He was very upfront about it. He was very upfront about that. And I think at the time, this guy was actually possibly Boothby's lover. So we know that, I'm sure. Yeah, I don't know whether Boothby was gay or whether he was bi, but I'm sure that this guy was actually Boothby's lover. And at some point, Ron Kray had liaisons with Boothby, which is documented anyway.
Yeah, it seems to be that he was, because otherwise, why would he use his name to get out of the what one was it when he? Who was it? They was arrested for. Was it GBH, or was it the murder? And then they used Boothby's name to the government to get him off.
I think it was possibly the murder, because the high up was told, high up in the police force, leave them alone, because at the time, if it got out that Ron Kray was having a form of relationship with Boothby, that and that got out, and also that Boothby's interests got out, it could have quite easily at the time brought down the government, and that's what the top cops were worried about. And that's what they said. Yeah, that's why they said leave the Krays alone, and that's why they were able to walk around bold as brass, knowing that the police wanted them. Sorry.
Well, if you think about it, at the time, you had the Great Train Robbery, you had the Krays, you had the Christine Keeler affair. The government was just in turmoil, wasn't it? So I just think they sort of thought, let's make an example of these people to show the government, like the British people, that we're still here and whatever. But
because the Great Train Robbery,
down. In 1952, they were both imprisoned in the Tower of London for being AWOL, for being absent without leave, and I believe they was two of the last people to be imprisoned there.
They was actually the last people to be imprisoned in the Tower of London. There's actually a caption in Born Fighter, which was one of Reg Kray's books, where they actually mention that they were imprisoned in the Tower of London. And they actually escaped. They managed to escape the hangman's noose at one point, for something
Really?
that, they did actually manage to escape the hangman's noose when death was capital punishment. But I remember reading in the book, I recall reading in the book that there was a lad who was imprisoned with Reg. He'd only got to be about 19, 20. And he didn't. He was actually hung. And Reg actually helped him with his final affairs before this poor lad was hung, which is quite a shame, really, to be the age of 19, 20. You've had no real life. This lad had no real life.
Yeah.
But he'd obviously done something extreme, and he was hung for it.
That wasn't, if memory's right, when was Craig and Bentley? One was too young, wasn't it? One got hanged. I think he was the last one hanged in England. When he Bentley, wouldn't have been him, would it?
I'm not really sure. That's something I'd look up again. It's a possibility it could have been him, but like I said, I can't really say any name because I'm not actually 100% certain myself. I didn't get that far with the book because I've had other books as well on Ron and on Reg, and I've been browsing through those as and when I can. But yeah, it's a possibility it could have been.
And something else I found out only very, very recently. I didn't know, and I thought I knew quite a lot about them. They actually had a sister.
No, that I didn't.
Who died when she was like an infant, very, very young.
Yes, that would have been
Vivian.
It was either Vivian or Violet. Yes, they did actually have a sister who died in infancy, sadly. But if she had survived, then it would bring into question, because I think they would have been older than the sister. Would they have still carried on the same path? Would they still carried on being gangsters, or would they have just had the clubs and been average, respectable businessmen? Unfortunately, to the event that happened where she died in infancy, it's something that we'll never know, because we can't go and ask Ron, we can't go and ask Reg, because sadly they're no longer with us as well.
I mean, whenever I've watched the films, and I like a lot of fans, if you want, I've seen them all. I sort of got the impression that Ronnie never really took his tablets when he should.
No, that is correct.
And Ronnie, I think if he'd have been, and I think if he had done and kept his, his brain under control, I think they would have gone a different path. As in, they had the clubs and whatever, but because Ronnie was a schizophrenic, things happened that they had no control over.
Definitely. Well, as we know, the twins had diphtheria in infancy. Well, just after infancy. But that's possibly the benefactor to Ronnie's schizophrenia. That could have linked to schizophrenia. I don't think we'll ever know on that. But it's a possibility that that's what could have contributed to Ronnie's schizophrenia. We both know that, and other people may know that they suffered with depression as well. Reg certainly did. In his later years, when he was in Parkhurst, he suffered heavily with depression. He tried to commit suicide by slashing his wrists. That is documented that he tried to do that. So, they both did suffer with their mental health. But let's say it was more
Yeah.
Ronnie than Reg.
I mean, because sort of watching the films and whatever, I always got the impression that oh, right, he's not going to have me bed now. Oh, who was the one who looked after all the affairs? Who McVitie tried to shoot?
Oh, that was Leslie Payne.
Leslie Payne, yeah.
Yeah, Leslie.
You know,
Leslie Payne, frontman.
Watching the films, you sort of got the impression that Reg was sort of close to Leslie, but Ronnie thought he was trying to take over, didn't he?
He did. He did.
Yeah. Which, which sort of gives you the thing that if Ron had been on his medication permanently and been normal, you know, he wouldn't have tried to have him killed and whatever, because obviously they was earning money out of it.
Oh, definitely, because Leslie Payne was a frontman for the long firms that Kray Twins were involved with, you know, and Reg saw the running of some of the clubs, and Ron just went along with it. But the thing is, same with Leslie Payne. Actually, a good example would be the film Legend. Leslie Payne would never have spoken to Ron in the way he did. Like, I'm not scared of you. He would have been terrified of him because of his temper. And Leslie Payne knew exactly what Ronnie was capable of. And when you come up against a guy who's a paranoid schizophrenic and he's in a foul temper because you can't provide him with the money for what he needs, you are not going to turn around in an argument and say, I am not scared of you. You know, I won't take no crap off you, because that's a sure way of being possibly killed there and then on the spot, or given a severe beating. So some of the
it was in the film Legend, wasn't it? Where he, so it was in the film Legend where he supposedly hit him with a glass.
Yeah. Yeah, because Ronnie Kray wanted 50 grand for to build a village in Enugu, of which is documented. There's even evidence there that Ron and Reg went to Enugu and met the people in this village, and I don't know if they took pity or whether they thought it could be a money-making idea, but yeah, they wanted to build a small village for them so they had somewhere decent to live, and you know, the kids and the adults could have a fairly decent life out of poverty and a good education, which is something really that I believe the Krays never had. I don't think they had that proper education because of the way, as the school would say, from their behaviour. You know, I don't think they were model students, shall we say? No, I don't.
So did Reg actually go out there?
Sorry?
Did Reg actually go out to Enugu?
I believe he did. There is some photos where he's with African children. So I believe he did actually go to Enugu. I don't think he went the same time as Ron, but I believe he did actually go out there, yeah.
Because obviously in the films, it looks like it was all Ron's idea, wasn't it? You know, it was his baby. He wanted to, you know, he wanted Payne to go and get 50 grand out of the bank, you know, to send out there or whatever. But in the films, it never seemed to show Enugu anything to do with Reg.
No. There's a lot of discrepancies with a few of the films, though. You know, we know Ron went out to Enugu because, as you say, and quite correct, it was his dream, it was his baby to have a village built out there. I believe Reg did go, because I have seen, there's actually photos on the Kray's fan page where Ron is out there. And also Reg goes out there as well. But as for the films, there's a lot of discrepancies. They portrayed in the film The Krays with Martin Kemp and Gary Kemp, where Violet's in the hospital with the boys, and she says she's going to take them home. Now, I believe that's something Violet probably would have done. You know, she would have taken them home, because being at home is better medicine. They're with their family, they're with their mum. You know, it's probably going to help them recover better. But she turns around in the film and says, fuck you, fuck the lot of you. Violet never swore. Violet is exactly how John Pearson described her, like a Cockney Queen mother. She would help anybody. You know, if you was a stranger on the street and you knocked on 178 Valence Road's door, if you was in trouble, she would invite you in, she would give you a cup of tea, and she'd either call Ron or Reg down. But she never ever swore. She was not a foul-mouthed woman, as she was portrayed in The Krays. That never ever happened.
I mean, do you think she actually knew what was going on? She must have done.
I think she did. You know, why would Ron and Reg have all these guys around, you know, day or night, and try to keep things secret? You know, she has got to have known what was going on, but I believe she was probably in denial. You know, she knew it was going on, but she didn't want to believe it was going on.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly, as John Pearson said, she called them her bunnies. You know, they could do no wrong. Now, we know, we know they did a lot of bad things. And that's mainly what Ron and Reg are remembered for, is the bad things that they did. However, they did a lot of good as well. You know, they did a lot of charity events. They helped a lot of people out who were potless. You know, like I said, if you was around at the time and you went to 178 Valence Road, if you was in trouble, they would help you as much as they could. You know, they were quite generous with their help and financially. But yeah, it always sticks that people seem to remember Ron and Reg for the bad things that they did. And
that's the way of life, isn't it? Unfortunately,
it is. And I believe, if Ron hadn't have killed George Cornell and got somebody else to do it for him, which he had the resources to do that, there were people there who would have done it. And the same with McVitie. If Reg hadn't have killed McVitie and somebody else had done it for him, done a hit for him, I don't believe that they would have gone away. They possibly would have gone away, but not for as long as they did. And it's highly likely that
they'd have probably been accessories, wouldn't they?
Yeah, they would have just been accessories. But it's likely as well that Ron and Reg could possibly still be alive today, because Reg would have been treated for his bladder cancer. And, you know, Ron probably would have, with a heart attack, it's very difficult. But he probably would have got better treatment for it. You know, if it was known he had heart problems, he could have been medicated for that.
Well, it's not only that, he probably would have had private healthcare as well. With he would
Exactly.
have been looked after a little bit better.
Yeah, exactly. And like I say, Reg certainly would have been treated for bladder cancer, because when he was in Maidstone, all they gave him was milk and magnesia, saying, "Oh, this will help. This will help."
Mm.
Where in fact it was terminal bladder cancer, and there was nothing that really could be done because it'd gone too far by the time he was released on compassionate grounds, which is quite disgusting at the time. They didn't take his illness seriously.
No, I think they I wouldn't say they got what they deserved, but they deserve to go away. But
Yeah,
I mean, now you can do what you want now. 5 years, it's ridiculous.
it is.
And it's not fair any way, shape, or form. But what film do you think was more to the truth out of all the films that have been done?
I would lean more towards the Krays, because it did show that they had the clubs. It also shows that when Jack McVitie was killed, it was done with no witnesses, because there was no party going on when he actually murdered him, when Reg murdered Jack, because everybody was told to leave. Somebody gave Blonde Carol money and said, "Find another party to go to. We need a meeting." And everybody left. In the film Legend, it actually portrays that there was actually basically a house full of people when Reg killed Jack, which is not the case. That did not actually happen. Like, as I say, Carol Skinner, who was known as Blonde Carol, was given a few quid and said, "We need a meeting. It's the only place we can do it. Find yourself another party." And that's when Jack was brought to the house, and there was a confrontation, massive argument, and he was killed. But the only trouble is, in the film The Krays, they portray Jack as trying to escape through a window. He put his head through a window and tried to escape. Again, that was not the case. Yes, the window was broke, but he actually punched it in frustration. But as for the gun,
who, Reg or the hat?
No, that was actually Jack. Jack punched the window in frustration. Right. But the gun part of it is accurate. The gun did jam. And that's where Reg was handed a knife, and he killed Jack with a knife instead. Even though he did, I also believe, from what I've read and from also watching the films, if people can make their own mind up on this one, Ronnie did actually have a go at him as well. I think Ronnie smacked him. But, Jack was a big bloke. He was near enough 6 foot or just over 6 foot, and he could handle himself. And the reason he was called the reason he was called Jack the Hat was because he did have his hair was starting to go at the back of his head, so they actually portrayed that part of him correctly. That's why he wore the hat, the trilby hat, whichever hat he wanted to wear at the time, because he was very self-conscious about the bald patch appearing at the back of his head around the crown, where his crown would be. So, the film's a part accurate and part fiction, really. If I can go on to say about the film. Sorry, carry on.
No, go on, you carry on, mate.
Okay, yeah, if I can actually go on to say about the rape scene in Legend. Again, purely fictional. It never happened. There was no way Reg would have done that to Francis, because he adored her too much. yeah, there was a strain on their relationship because Reg was being called out here, there, and everywhere to different clubs all for trouble. And the majority of the time, if he was a club, he'd take Francis with him. And if you're a young woman, you don't want to be called out at 1 o'clock in the morning to be taken to a nightclub because even though your husband owns it, there's trouble going on. You don't want to be part of that.
No.
So yeah, the rape scene was totally inaccurate.
So why do you think they put it in there then? What was the thinking behind that?
I don't really know on that one. Whether it was to discredit Reg, I really don't know. Possibly that's what it was to do with, is to discredit him more. But yeah, even, and I'll drop a name here, Maureen Flanagan Cox will say that never actually happened because he was besotted by her. He adored Francis too much to even attempt to do that. And there's even documentaries online. I would say the most credible interview would have been with Johnny Squibb, who was a long life friend of the family, not just the twins. And he even said that Reg had chatted with him and, you know, the marriage was never consummated. So if he never consummated marriage, I really could never have seen him doing that to Francis at all, you know.
No. And something else that I noticed in all the films was the events that took place at Mr. Smith's. That was never shown.
No. I've noticed that myself. However, in Legend, they never showed this. I don't think they showed this in the Krays, in the 1990 film, The Krays. The Trouble at Pacelli's, where Ron and Reg used to have a cup of tea and something to eat. Where there was trouble there. That was only ever portrayed from the films I've seen, in Legend. It was never shown in the Krays, and like I said, the 1990 film. So why it was shown in one and not the other, I don't know. Whether it's just to mix things up, and you know, we'll show you some events in one film and then we'll show you some events in another.
Because what they didn't seem to show was, obviously, after Mr. Smith's, it was the next night when Ronnie went and shot Cornell, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah, he shot him dead in the Blind Beggar. But there's a lot of speculation to why he was shot. Some people say it's because Cornell kept calling him a fat puff. There's actually taped interviews from Broadmoor with Ronnie Kray. And Ron Kray himself says it's not because he called me a fat puff. It's because he made threats to get me. So I got him first. And he does actually say that.
He was actually friends with them, wasn't he, in the early days?
They was.
Cornell and the Krays were actually friends.
They was friends. It's like the Richardsons and the Krays never got on. And George Cornell was part of the Richardson crew. But in the early years of when I believe Reg was first imprisoned, when he was in his 20s, him and Charlie Richardson were in the same prison together. They were never on speaking terms, but they would be on nodding terms, and they'd exchange newspapers. Yeah. And that's as far as it ever
respect
went.
One another, they done.
Yeah, but that's as far as it ever went. Was literally nodding terms, and you know, say Reg would have the Daily Mail, and Charlie had the Telegraph. Yeah, they'd exchange newspapers. So, that's so one had another paper to read. But yeah, that's as far as it ever went.
I mean, I think out of all the films, I preferred Legend.
Yeah.
Just because it was sort of, I suppose, the date and whatever. But sort of diversified. Evidently, I mean, we were talking earlier that they was in that showbiz world, wasn't they?
They
was with Judy Garland.
Yeah.
Henry Cooper.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, they definitely had that showbiz glamour and lifestyle from the people who they mixed with. It wasn't just Barbara Windsor and Judy Garland and Henry Cooper. There was even American boxers who came over. They even provided security for Frank Sinatra when he was in the country.
I read that.
Yeah, they did actually. Sort out.
Didn't Charlie arrange that?
Charlie did arrange it, but I think that Reg and Ron got money out of it some way or another.
Because that was Kray Enterprises, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah, that certainly was.
Yeah. And do you think the room, well, call it a room, but about the Reggie had an affair with Barbara Windsor or a one night stand?
I believe he did, but at the time she was also married to Ronnie Knight, who was a East End gangster.
Yeah.
But going away from that, I don't think anything ever happened of that. However, it was noted that Barbara Windsor had an affair with Sid James, and Ronnie Knight threatened to kill Sid if he didn't stop it. But he didn't threaten. Wow. He didn't threaten Reg. So, yeah.
Fun enough, something else I sort of researched was that evidently they was going to kidnap Cliff Richard.
No, that I didn't know. Excuse me.
Yeah.
That I didn't know. That's actually a new one on me. That's the first
time.
They
whether it's true or not, I don't know. But that's something that was researched. And also Lucian Freud.
Yeah.
Evidently owed the twins up to $500,000 in unpaid gambling debts.
Yeah.
Now, $500,000 in the 60s, what would that be today? Ridiculous amount of money.
Yeah.
I mean, how can you get into £500,000 worth of debt with them?
Exactly. It's just having debts on tick, basically. But yeah, there was actually a few people that had gambling debts to the twins. But how the twins would allow it to amount to that amount is unbelievable. You go to a Bucky's today, you can have an account, but I doubt whether they would allow you to have £500,000 worth of debt. So why the twins would have allowed that, I really don't know, because it's not really going to get them anywhere. You can only take so much of somebody. And if that person still owes you money, then how are you going to try and clear it? So yeah.
The thing is that it wasn't physical money as such, was it? It was only money. He'd had a bet and he'd lost. So it wasn't any money they actually lost. But
no, never actually lost anything.
If it was 50, you might as well owe $500,000. If you ain't going to get the 50 grand, you ain't going to get the $500,000.
No, not at all.
And he supposedly cancelled a painting gallery because he was worried the Krays were going to turn up to demand their money back.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but
yeah, I think that's what you probably have to keep open-minded about.
Yeah. we mentioned that Lambriano brothers, and they disposed of the body, didn't they, from Blom Carroll's flats?
Yes. Tony was actually driving, I believe, I'm not sure if it was Jack's car or his own car. But Jack was, like I say,
I believe it was X.
he was, yeah, 'cause Jack had a Ford Zephyr, I think it was it? Zodiac? I know he was a Ford, and he was either the Zodiac or the Zephyr. But Jack was too big to fit in the boot. That's why I say he was quite a big bloke. He was nigh on 6 foot, possibly over.
Yeah.
And it was Tony who was driving the car with Jack on the back seat, and Chris followed on in his car with a shooter, just in case there was any trouble. And it was actually Freddie Foreman who eventually got rid of the body for them.
Yeah.
But going back to that,
well,
it's like with the murder of Frank Mitchell, neither twin killed him. It was Freddie Foreman who killed him. So why the twins were convicted for that murder is beggars belief. They should have been an accessory, not actual murder, because they were not physically there and they didn't physically kill him. So
yeah,
that's one thing I've never really understood. Why?
Yeah. Freddie Foreman has always said that he lost, or he disposed of the bodies out to sea. Although there's also rumours that they are in the boat flyover. You know, so I don't suppose we'll ever know. I mean, Fred's admitted to it. So, you know, taking them out to sea and losing them. But that they did sort of. Fred has been on record to say that, you know, it would have been good if someone had shot the Krays. They was cause of aggravation and a lot of upset.
Yeah, that is true, because there was actually a meeting with Fred Foreman and other underworld gangsters who were ready to wipe the Kray twins out, and it was only for them being sent to prison that basically saved their lives, because Fred said we were ready to iron them out. They were getting too above themselves, as he says, and Ronnie was way too violent and out of control, which is correct. Ronnie was very violent and he was getting out of control because he wasn't taking, as you say, as you said earlier in this podcast, he wasn't taking his medication like he should have been. And, you know, but eventually, through his own ignorance, should I say, of not taking his meds, led to his incarceration in Parkhurst and then obviously over to Broadmoor. So, if Ron had taken his meds like he should have done, then, I don't believe they would have.
We might not be having this conversation now.
Exactly, and they wouldn't have had as much. They wouldn't have had as much trouble as they had if Ron had taken his meds. And it was also quite evident that Ron dominated Reg. It's very evident that you can see that. You see photos later on of Reg, and the man was living on his nerves. He looked a nervous wreck at times because of everything that was going on, obviously, and the domination of his twin brother, Ron. You know, you jump, and how high? So,
yeah. I did say that was because, or part of it was that when they weren't together, he never really knew what Ron was doing.
Yeah.
And obviously, you know, Ron could turn on a flick of a switch.
Oh, exactly. Same as like Lenny said. Yeah, Lenny Hamilton said exactly the same. You didn't know how to take Ron, and other people had
Mm.
said as well who knew Ron very well, who'd be members of the firm or just family friends. Ron had a look, and that look could be it could be a smile, and it could mean I like you, you're going to be a good friend, or I want to hurt you, and I want to hurt you badly.
Mm.
So yeah,
Well, I mean, I knew Lenny.
yeah,
He used to drink in a pub we used to drink in, and he worked the doors. I won't mention no names, but one of the clubs that we used to drink in. And we'd go there and we'd just walk right through, no problem at all.
yeah,
I was reading on one of the pages the other day that every time you spoke to Lenny, he come out with a um, different version of what happened to him.
yeah. I've noticed that because
So
sometimes, the story would slightly change, and it'd be like, well, why change the story? Stick to the same story, because then people are not going to
yeah,
doubt you. You're not going to have people turn
that's
around
right.
saying you're a bullshitter, or this never actually happened. You're
Yeah,
making it up. I've seen a couple documentaries where he has been daft in his own way and changed the story. Now, no disrespect to the
well,
guy.
as you say, no. I mean,
Yeah,
to be honest, he never spoke about it. Even like when we was drinking, that his past life wasn't even mentioned once.
yeah,
And we didn't talk about it. He didn't talk about it, and you just left it at that. You know.
yeah. No,
Um,
well,
but
that's fair enough, because his past is his past. It doesn't need to
yeah,
be brought up. That's probably how Lenny would have seen it. The past is the past. They've gone away. The troubles have gone away, and that's it. Just leave it at that. That's possibly how he would have felt. I don't know, because I never personally knew him.
mm,
I'd never met him.
yeah. I mean, his grandson Mickey used to work for me many years ago, and I didn't know it was his grandson until we got talking.
Oh,
It's just one of them things. But it was what it was. But I think in that era, because they sort of took over from Jack Spot, didn't they? Jack Spot was sort of
yeah,
just got rid of Billy Hill,
yeah, yeah.
and they were sort of on the peripheral of taking over from Jack Spot.
Yeah, Jack Spot was their mentor, as you will, and that's mentioned in books as well. That Jack Spot was their mentor, because this would have been a time when they were amateur boxers, when they were boxing in East London, and Jack Spot saw an opportunity. You got two lads here who, they can carry on basically from what I'm doing or what Billy's been doing. And Jack took Ron and Reggie under his wing, as to say, So, it is documented where they've actually
Yeah,
said Jack was our mentor. Jack Spot, was our mentor. So no, that is actually
that's right.
accurate.
Yeah. Was actually his name was actually Jack Colmore, and then he changed after.
Yeah.
But I always thought that I could tell them apart, even
Yeah,
when they said like that, they're identical twins. I always thought Ronnie had a slightly bigger face,
he did.
and
No,
I could always tell them apart. But they are very, very much, identical.
well, they are. They are. I can actually tell the twins apart. But the thing is, there's actually photos of Ron when he got to be pre-teens, and he's got his Alsatian dog with him, Frida, I believe the dog's name was. But the thing is, you could tell it's Ron quite easily. Without a shadow of doubt, you could tell it's Ron. And there's a couple photos. There's I think they're probably coming into their early teens at this point. But there's a picture of them in Johnny Squibb's car, where you got both twins in the car, one in the front, one in the back. And they're quite openly smiling for the camera, you know, no problems there. And there's another picture of them in the front room of somebody's house. I'm not sure if it's Fallon's Road or a family friend's, where there's a TV, a little, like a 12-inch TV thing, you know. And there you can tell them apart. Although they're very, very identical, you can just tell them apart.
Yeah.
Like I say, it's the same whether in John Squibb's car as well. You can literally just tell them apart. It's difficult, but you can do it. Just. If I showed that,
there were stories about.
Sorry, carry on.
Yeah. So there was a story about when Ron was in Broadmoor.
Yeah.
And Reg went in to visit him, and they swapped, and Ron walked out. Is that true?
That is true. That is correct. And Ron was picked up. Reg was detained for a couple hours. And, you know, the governor turns around and says, "What the fuck's going on here? What have you done?" And once Reg confirmed who he was released, and Ron was picked up. I think it was a day or two later. But that actually did happen. That was actually correct.
So
they were where they swapped over.
So let's talk about Frank Mitchell.
Frank Mitchell, the Mad Axeman. Yes.
Yeah.
Frank was a gentle giant in his own way, but if he didn't get his own way, that's when you had problems with him. He wasn't the easiest.
He was a big man, wasn't he?
He was well over 6 foot. But he wasn't the type of guy you could control. If you tried to control him, he'd rebel. And that's what he did. Once the twins had gotten away from Dartmoor, from the work party, they got into a safe house and they got a woman for him, which he wanted. He wanted a woman for companionship, so that was all sorted out. However, he rebelled because he kept wanting to see the twins, and he was told the twins are busy. You know, they can't keep coming to your beck and call. They will come to you when they can come to you. And he got too much for them. It got to the point where they could not control him. And sadly, that was his demise. But Frank,
do you think? Do you think that they made a mistake in springing him?
I think they did. I think they made a well. I wouldn't think it was a mistake springing him, because Frank Mitchell was, although he was out of Dartmoor prison, he was basically at the roadside feeding a pony or a horse. He was actually with a work party at the time that this happened, and there was a car there waiting for him. Somebody managed to get him into the car and they drove him away, but they needed to get him away from that work party. And that's where he asked one of the screws, "Can you allow me to feed this pony while I'm having a break?" And it was allowed. He was then taken away from the scene and ended up in London in a flat set up by the twins. But the thing was, Frank Mitchell, although he was a fully grown man, he had the mental age of a child. This is what was documented. He actually had the mental age of a child. This could have contributed to why he rebelled a lot. You know, and even though he was called the Mad Axeman, there's no documentation of him killing anybody, but he was still given a life sentence. But I have not seen anywhere where he killed anybody. I know he entered an elderly couple's home and held them hostage, but he never killed them. So, you know, he should never have been given a life sentence. If any, he should have been sent to Broadmoor, not Dartmoor, you know, for his mental well-being. He was in totally the wrong place. The justice system really done him over there. So yeah, he should have actually stayed in. He should have gone to Broadmoor and stayed there, not to a mainstream hardened prison. Like I know Dartmoor is one of the hardest prisons in the southwest to survive in. I know people who've been in there, and you know, it's very bleak. It's quite horrible. I've seen Dartmoor. I've been past it. And it has been said, if you try to escape from Dartmoor, you won't get very far because you get disorientated, because you actually end up wandering around the moors, and you can get picked up that way. No, Dartmoor's a very bleak and horrible place. It's not somewhere where if you're to commit a crime, don't go there. You know, request a different prison. Just not the nicest of places. Not the nicest at all.
And getting on to when he was murdered, they told him, or the part of the firm told him they was going to take him to see the twins, didn't they? And they put him in the common van.
Yes,
and
yes, that's correct.
That's where Fully Foreman shot him, wasn't it?
Yeah, he had about 3 gunshots to the chest, which were fired off. I think it was Albert Donahue who was present at the time. But yeah, he ended up with 3 or 4 slugs in the chest, and that still did not kill him. And then another fire was shot, and another shot was fired. Sorry, and that's what killed him. But yeah, he was told, okay, the twins have, how do you put it, given in. So yeah, they will see you. And unfortunately, that was his demise when he was told, yeah, the twins are going to see you, get in the van. And that was it. That was the last anybody ever saw of him, because he was killed there and then in the back of the van.
Because it was reported that neighbours heard a car backfiring, wasn't it? That would obviously have been the gun, like the gun going off, the gunshot.
Yeah.
But to be shot 3 times in the chest, was right, because it couldn't have been no more than a foot to 18 inches.
Exactly, because
you imagine the back of a common van's only probably 5 foot apart, 5 foot wide.
Yeah. I know somebody who actually owns a common van, and yeah, there's not really a lot of space in the back of one of those. They actually use one in the film The Krays, where they go after the Maltese gang. That's a common van where Ron and Reggie sat at the back of it. So yeah, there's not really a lot of space, and for a guy who's over 6 foot as well, yeah, it takes.
Well, supposedly they were sitting on the wheel arches, weren't they?
Yeah,
supposedly.
Yeah. Well, supposedly yes, but even then, you still wouldn't have a lot of room.
No. I mean, it is literally point blank, isn't it?
It was actually point blank to the chest. Heavy, 3 or 4 shots to the chest, and it didn't kill him. and another shot did. It takes a lot, a lot of slugs to, as I would say, to kill him. So definitely.
The only thing I couldn't understand about that was, if you're going to shoot him, why not just shoot him in the head where you know he's going to die instantly?
Exactly.
Or just would have been.
Yeah, put the gun to his mouth and shoot, or straight to the head, whichever way you go. Yeah, he would have killed him instantly. That was a botched, seriously botched murder. That was,
So, if I'm right in thinking, Foreman, he admitted to 3 murders, didn't he, Foreman?
Yes.
Mitchell. Was it who was the one he killed? Oh, one of his relations. Was that something? I can't remember now.
No, I can't remember name. I can't remember names, but no, the main one would have been obviously Frank Mitchell, and then you've also got him for the disposing of the bodies of Mitchell and Jack the Hat McVitie.
Jack,
yeah. Although he didn't personally kill the guy, he still got done for it, but mainly as, like I say, for disposal of the body.
Well, he got 10 years, didn't he, for that?
Yeah, he got 10 years
for disposing of Jack's thing. Yeah. What do you think made them go to South London to get rid of Jack's body? Because of the Richardsons being over there, and maybe they would have got blamed for it, or what?
Possibly, because Jack did used to Jack was a wind-up merchant. He liked to wind people up, and he liked to push his luck. And I think there is documentation there where he did have some dealings with the Richardsons, with Charlie and Eddie. So if he crossed paths with the Richardsons and pushed his luck too far, then I think that's the possibility. He was trying to shift the blame over to the Richardsons, and let them get done for the murder. Like I say, Jack was very temperamental. He was a wind-up merchant. He seriously did like to try and push his luck with whoever he could.
If you sort of go by the films, he was always popping pills, wasn't
he? Yeah. He liked his Purple Hearts. That's the one that was portrayed. He likes these. He did like his Purple Hearts at the time, which is what the equivalent now to ecstasy, really. But he did like popping his pills and getting pissed. When he was taken to Blonde Carol's house, he burst through the door saying, "Where's the party? Where's the girls?" And he wasn't met with any girls. He wasn't met with any party. He was met with a couple of members of the firm. One being Chris Lambriani and Ron and Reg. He was known. He liked.
And didn't Chris? He walked out, didn't he? He said he don't want nothing to do with it. Is that correct?
Yeah, Chris actually.
When he was.
Chris didn't want anything to do with it, and it is known that actually it upset him deeply. It deeply upset Chris, and he actually went and sat on the stairs and cried because he could hear Jack being killed. And it really did. I can only imagine, or partly imagine, what he felt. If you're in a house and somebody in the next room's being murdered and you can't do anything to stop it, and if you do, you're probably going to be next. It really deeply upset him, and he did leave, and then he came back to the house, but he only came back to help clean up. what nobody knew at the time was there was actually 2 kids asleep upstairs in the house.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, there were actually 2 kids asleep in the house, and that upset Chris even more. And he actually cleaned up with. He actually says he had socks on his hands to try and clean up and try and get rid of fingerprints off things. So yeah, it was very bodged.
Well,
And very,
there seems to be, yeah. There seems to be 2 different versions, because I think it was in the Krays where Reggie obviously carried a knife in him and then put the knife through his eye.
yeah.
But if you read about it, he says he actually impaled him to the floor through the throat.
Yeah, that I'd be more inclined to believe where he was impaled through the throat rather than being stabbed through the eye, because there's no mention of him being stabbed in the eye by any of the firm members. So yeah, I'm more I'd be more inclined to the throat rather than the eye job.
Yeah. Well,
but they
listen, Tom.
Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, what I was going to say was, I mean, we've been going for over an hour now.
Oh God, yeah. No,
would you be up for coming back next week, next Wednesday?
Yeah, I'll be able to come back again.
Yeah,
but yeah,
well,
we can leave it at that. But there was another person killed, so we know there was Jack the Hat, and we know there was George Cornell. But there was a third person,
right,
which is mentioned in
really
Born Fighter. But we'll leave that one for next week rather than.
So you're going to leave us on a cliff edge?
I'm going to leave you on the cliff edge on that one. But there was actually.
That's not very good, is
it? No, there was actually a third person, but Ron and Reg never said who it was. And even in Reggie's last interview we ever did, he said there was a third person who was killed. But
right,
no names were ever mentioned.
So do you know the name of the third person?
I don't, but I know how it happened.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're going to keep that as a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
For next week.
Definitely.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Tom, it's been very, very interesting, and it's nice to talk about something that I enjoy talking about as well, and getting not so much firsthand, but someone that's obviously knows a lot, has researched a lot, and taken it. But before, if everybody can please like, share, and subscribe, it doesn't cost nothing.
Definitely.
Especially if you're on YouTube watching, please like and share and subscribe. It goes a long way to every single person's channel you watch on YouTube. It goes a long way. So if you can do that, it'd be much appreciated. So should we say the same time next week?
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
Yeah, that's all good.
What I'll do is, obviously, we've had a little bit of trouble with the internet. I'm just waiting for Skype to come down and fix my internet. I'm on Wi-Fi at the moment, but I'll arrange it the next week. It's done through Ethernet, and there won't be no problems whatsoever.
Yeah, that's. I've
actually. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's cool. It's nice chatting with you. Nice to share some information and experiences.
And if you could have a word with a couple of people we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, no problem. I can do that. I can sort that.
No names.
No.
We'll try and leave that as a cliffhanger as well. So hopefully next week we'll have Tom giving or revealing the third person who was killed, and also hopefully a very special guest.
Yep.
I won't mention no names, but if it comes off, let's just say it's someone who knew the Krays very, very well.
Definitely.
Very well.
Somebody who, who's a friend of mine and will also give facts and also speak the truth and openly about the Kray family. So not just the twins, but the family itself.
Right. Okay. Well, listen, Tom, enjoy the rest of the day, mate. I really do appreciate you coming on.
Yeah.
I'll do some more research between now and next week and try up with something that I can catch you out on.
Yeah. Definitely.
And then we'll go from there. As I say, please do join in again next week. It's been very interesting. So once again, Tom, thank you very much, mate.
And thank you, Charlie.
I'll speak to you next week.
Yep, I'll speak to you next week. Okay. Cheers.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.